So you heard just a few moments ago what the Mayor made of today's police operation. The Met certainly kept their promise to meet force with force if trouble broke out.
And of course, in pockets, there was trouble. So did Gold Command stick to its policing plan? And how much was it on the ground? How was it on the ground for the 3,000 men and women drafted into the Square Mile today? Well, Glen Goodman has the full story of the Met policing the city.
The police were determined to send out one clear message this morning. We're everywhere. Walking around the Square Mile, it seemed there wasn't a street, a doorway or a back alley that wasn't being guarded by one of London's finest. The Square Mile is famously surrounded by a ring of steel. Today, the Met added a ring of muscle. They marched the protesters from 4 tube stations towards the Bank of England. And once everyone was in place, the police surrounded them from every angle. The tactics of the police are clear. From midday, when people converged outside the Bank of England, they cordoned off the area and kept everybody trapped inside. Now, there are 2 lines of police here, as you can see. One line to keep the people in from getting out, and the other line to keep the people outside from getting in. While people were protesting around the Bank of England, they weren't really aware of the cordon, but soon, as human beings do, some started to need the toilet, and they found out that they weren't allowed to go.
And I want to prove to my kids that I've come here today, and now I want to leave, and they won't let me leave. That kind of thing, and now they won't let us go through.
The kids can't use the toilet?
Well, we can't leave. We just want to go. I've got a 4.5-month-old baby, and they won't let us leave, and they're not going to talk to us, so.
That was the nice face of the anti-G20 movement, but within minutes, police met the nasty face. As they attempted to arrest one protester, the others hemmed 2 officers into a corner. They called for backup, and their colleagues rushed the crowd. As the police backed away with the arrested man, bottles and cans were thrown. The mood was turning ugly. Minutes later, the windows of the Royal Bank of Scotland were being smashed and pitched battles were breaking out between the police and protesters.
I think you will see we had to be very pragmatic in the way we dealt with the crowd. The crowd dynamic is very, very important. And bear in mind that we've made 24 arrests today.
It seems that on one hand, the Met succeeded today. They managed to contain the violence, stopping the protests from streaming out across the city. On the other hand, in restricting the protesters' freedom of movement, they were forced to line up head-to-head with the protesters, which some may argue was bound to have just one outcome. Glen Goodman, London Tonight, Threadneedle Street.
The way it looks is that even if the majority of protesters came with the intention of making their point peacefully, there was a hardcore bent on trouble.
We sent Nick Wallace down into the demonstrations to see events for himself. And here is his eyewitness report from inside the protests.
OK, well, it's 10:15 and I'm at London Bridge, which is one of the muster points for the protesters who are marching on the Bank of England.